When he was a youngster, his dream was to build. Many times, Bertie would be alone in the corner of one of the rooms, drawing and dreaming about buildings. And so I think that saying, what the mind can perceive, one will conceive. I think that's what happened in Bertie's case.
You got to like him. You've got to like him. Not only for what he's done, but for who he is. This rare combination of an ability to do the job in his chosen profession and a real commitment to opportunity and social justice.
I got to know John Cruz as he started his upward climb on the ladder of leadership in this community. Cape Verdeans probably were the first people related to Africa that were dominant in the Roxbury community. Africans from other nations started migrating around Roxbury at later dates. But Cape Verde was very much a part of the lower Roxbury life in the 1930s and the 1940s.
You really wanted to become a Mason. The Italians were the Masons, the Irishmen were the electricians, so that trade was very difficult to get into. So he went into carpentry.
My father learned his trade down in the Cape, basically self-taught, working with other carpenters down there. And then when he came up from the Cape with a lot of other people looking for work in the construction field, and became very frustrated because back then it was the adage that we hear, last hired, first fired. So out of frustration, he formed his own company. So out of adversity becomes opportunity. My father's vision, I think, was to be the best framer at that time that he could be, the best contractor. He was always quality issues with him. You know, he was always checking the job for a minute thing that maybe other people wouldn't check, because he was very proud of his name, very proud of being a minority, and he didn't want anyone to say that as a black guy, his work wasn't on par with anybody else's.
He's a guy who had the kind of determination of a construction guy and the heart of a social worker, and he put the two of them together. There was a period when urban renewal was called Negro removal. And what John Cruz and a few others said was, well, you know what? You're getting all this federal money to fix up a neighborhood. How about fixing up the people in the neighborhood, too? How about doing something for them?
It's a part of the community in which he raised his family, in which he lived, and he felt that he had an obligation to make the community a better place in which to live.
He was driven to be a businessman, to be a builder, to be a developer. He had tremendous foresight, so much so that he brought his son, John III, into the business with him as a partner. And when I saw the two of them together, I knew that this was a formidable father-son team.
Certainly when I was governor, a great many of the projects we did in not just Roxbury and Dorchester, but around town, especially on the housing side, were done by Cruz, and done well.
I think the turning point for us was the advent of affirmative action, in particular Mass Housing Finance Agency sponsored classes about development geared towards the minority community. Our first big break on the construction side came the result of almost that same program, because it was a black builder, Dennis Blackett, a black developer at that time, who wanted to try his best to use a black contractor. And that was it, providing a performance and payment bond sort of put legitimacy behind the company and some strength. Our first development project, which was Taurus at Fountain Hill. And after that, you know, there was really no going back to where we were before. We were on a pattern of growth after that. So it was John B. Cruz Construction, and then after that we formed Cruz Development Corp. And then sometime after that, we formed the management company, and so we had 3 companies now.
My dad always said, if you want it, you've got to work for it.
When Bertie goes to work, he has a hard hat on or a baseball hat, dirty. As soon as he gets there, he's very focused and detailed. Yeah, there's nothing that goes by. He catches everything. So
he would walk by a job site and the guys would be talking. And he'd say, are you on your lunch or your break? And they'd say, no. He'd say, well, then stop talking and go back to work. You're on my time. So he was a tough man. He really was.
But that's the kind of guy he is. You expect to see him in his work shoes, his work pants, his work shirt, and involved with the men that if you're not careful, you would think he's just another worker.
I used to think my father was a cruel slave taskmaster because he had me out there. When none of my friends were out there working, I was, from my summers, from whatever it was, 12 or 13, I was out there. And on Saturdays, when my friends were watching cartoons or lounging around doing whatever, my father had me out here for what he called his half-a-day work. My father's half-a-day work Saturday was mean you left the job at 2 o'clock. He didn't know what 12 was. And the frustrating part about it is some of the men would go home at 12 or 12:30 because he told them a half a day. But he always found some work for him and I to do. When I turned 16 and got my license, he said, well, you've been working these last couple of summers, because I only got spending money. I never saw a paycheck. He said, I've been saving your money if you work these last 3 summers and you can get a car. And I said, gee, work doesn't suck. Work is great.
Bertie is fantastic. He's all that people should want to be. Does he wear a tie ever?
We started a romance at 16 and 18. A very sweet, loving, caring romance. Then when I became a widow 45 years later, I came back to Bertie. And we resumed romance. The flame hadn't died. It had flickered, but it hadn't died. And that's where we started up again. I'm a now woman. It's obvious to everybody who knows me. And a rebel. Not a radical, but a rebel. And I wanted equality. And I let Bertie know that if a man has to be sensitive to a woman's needs. Bertie and I became known as Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers because we danced so beautifully together. But later, we realized that perhaps what the people saw in our dancing was the bonding that had taken place between me and Bertie.
My hero in life is my father. The scholarship that we're setting up is really to attribute and to pay honor and homage to a great man who never looked for credit for any of the things he did, and still wouldn't now. This isn't his idea. It's my idea because I think a person of that great quality and character should be recognized.
The legacy, to me, means that someone who has the integrity, somebody who has the willingness to pull themselves up and say, I can do it, will be able to do it because they will have help.
This gives hope in this day and age with all immigrant people that America is a place where you are welcome, and America is a place where, if determined, you can be successful. And I think Mr. Cruz has proven that as a son of the Cape Verde Islands.
Having a scholarship endowed in his name at a first-rate public institution, which does so much to institutionalize what he had to kind of pioneer in terms of getting ahead, and an institution provided over by a very distinguished Cape Verdean educator. It was just a perfect coming together.
I think that this is one of the most important parts of community life, is the house that you live in, and John Cruz represents the house that you live in.
So he's instilled a lot of good in all of us.
If you have to do it, then do it. If you have to, then do it. That's Bertie Cruz.